So I have good news and I have bad news. The good news here is that we have a phenomenal interview, the first interview I've actually done on this channel, and it is with a friend of mine, Stephen Heiner, who has a very fascinating story about moving to Europe, living in Paris as a writer, working 2 days a week by choice, and also how he actually changed from functioning as an ENFP to an ENTJ. I would not have believed it myself if I did not know him for about a year before he had told me that this happened. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that the software I was using to record the video in the interview totally crapped the bed. And so there is basically no video. I've got about 10 seconds at the beginning. So you'll know what Stephen looks like and you can imagine it for the rest of the interview, but it's just going to get into us talking. So if you prefer to just listen to this episode, this might be a great chance to head over to the podcast. I'll link to that below and have a card pop up here so you can subscribe to the podcast and listen to it, which might be easier since there's no video. Or you can just leave it on here in the background without any video there. I am going to put this on YouTube in the reverse order. So we actually talked for about an hour and a half. And the first hour we talked about business, about moving to Europe, about how to set up your day, how to, like the kind of American way of living in terms of work, work, work versus the European way. The second part, we talk about Stephen's change from being an ENFP to an ENTJ. And I'm going to put that part up first here on YouTube because the way YouTube's algorithm works for my channel right now is anything that says ENFP gets a lot of views. And so I'm going to put that part up first here. That's what you're about to watch. And that's going to mean that more people will see this. And then I know you're going to want to watch part 2 where we get into Stephen's very interesting life and our conversation there. All right, let's get to it. What we're talking about here is this interesting, I don't know if we'd call it a transformation or change. I think you described it better than I would, but in personality type, in your Myers-Briggs type. And in this case, from originally testing as an ENFP to retiring, as you said, as an ENFP, and now functioning essentially as an ENTJ. And not in the case where it's an issue with the test or, because often with people with Myers-Briggs, the test isn't accurate. So they think they are one type and then they test again. They're like, look, I changed. But in this case, it's not that. It's a matter of changing. I thought you had a really cool story about that. So I'll let you lead off on this miracle.
So as to Dan's point, yes, if people are taking the test and they're, let's say, a borderline EI or whatever it is, and they're only slightly over the edge on one or the other, this isn't what we're talking about. So I had tested ENFP and ENFP, I don't know how many times.
And as an ENFP, you probably took a lot of tests about yourself. So you were very sure you were an ENFP.
Right. ENFPs revel in not only taking those tests, but then going through and being happy and excited when everything confirms what you think about yourself already. All the good stuff, at least. We ignore the bad. Yeah. So I can say that as a retired ENFP. So I had a very good... my degree's in literature, but I went to a liberal arts college, so we were all required to take a intro level class in psychology. And I had a really good relationship with my intro to psych professor, who was also the department chair for that department. So it was really great to be taught by the department chair. And we had a really good time. But one of the things that we talked about was Myers-Briggs, and I remember clearly hearing in his class, Myers-Briggs isn't a stamp of this is who you are, you can never change, but it pretty accurately represents who you are as a person and is unlikely to change. And I remember taking the test maybe a couple years after I had his class, and I got ENTJ, and I thought, well, this is a mistake. Obviously, I'm an ENFP. And I took another test, scored ENTJ again. So I made an appointment, just a chance to catch up with him and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. It's not important. It's not urgent. I'm just curious. So one of those classic things, go see a college professor, hang out in the office. And I said, so I had this question about an apparent change in my Myers-Briggs. And he said, okay, can you tell me a little bit about what's been different since you were in my classroom and you were an ENFP and now, 2 years later, an ENTJ? And at the time, my business was really growing. I had more employees. Things in my life had gotten more serious around my business. There was just more momentum building. And I was
for those who didn't catch the last episode, you were in university, but you weren't your typical undergrad at this stage. You were building a business, you had employees, and you wanted to do a literature degree for your own intellectual growth, essentially.
The twist on that was I had been making money helping people by helping people take tests to go to university, right? And people never really ask you where you graduated from. They ask you, where'd you go to college? Where'd you go to school? And I could have truthfully said what at that point had only been the school I'd gone to for 2 years, which was Thomas More College out in New Hampshire. So, I went to Thomas More College. What did you study? I was studying liberal arts. That wasn't untruthful. But I thought at some point it was going to come out that the guy who charged, a lot of money to help your students get into college had never actually graduated from college. So I was going to night classes and classes during the day. And so that he met me when I first started that journey. And in 2008, when we had this conversation, I was on the verge of graduating and finally, being able to say, oh, my college degree, whatever that means. And so he looked at what had changed in my life and he said, oh, you're expressing TJ traits. And so you're still an EN. He says, but in order to have 10 employees or to manage, being in school full time and running a business full time, and by the way, trying to have a social life and, meld into Kansas City, you're having to take a bit more command, and you're not as free to lollygag as an FP would. So for those who don't know, ENTJ's tagline, you could say, is everybody relax, I'm in charge. And and the TJ side of me, which was probably latent, it was sitting back there. It's something I'm very comfortable with, but it came out of the woodwork because I needed to be a different person. I didn't realize that was really the person that I was going to become was part of a transformation. But it was interesting because, again, I don't know a lot about psychology. I'm not as well versed on Myers-Briggs as Dan is, but it's interesting to note that circumstances can allow you to change your life for better or for worse, but that, again, even a test like Myers-Briggs gives you insight. So the fact that I was testing TJ allowed me to assume even more of TJ than I had before. So whereas let's say I was an accidental, I'm an ENTJ, cool. Well, I'm an ENTJ, okay, I'm going to go all in. ENTJ.
So you embraced it and
mm-hmm. Yeah. Once I found out from him that it wasn't a mistake, and I connected the dots and say, oh, you're right. I am having to be more command oriented. I'm having to take care of my employees. I'm having to do these other things. Of course. Well, I'm going all in. Like, what do ENTJs do? What do they eat for breakfast? What do they wear to bed?
The competition. Right? That's what they eat for breakfast.
Right. Like, how many other ENTJs do I need to kill today? So that was really interesting for me, and throughout the years it's continued to guide me, and you saw it in our mastermind group. And it wasn't at that point, so many years down the road from that initial conversation with my professor, I've found a way to present it to others in a way that is sympathetic and understanding, because TJs can really rub people the wrong way. There's a particular group of people they will always rub the wrong way. Even if you tiptoe your TJ around them, they'll say, oh, look at this guy, he's so arrogant. So I found a way a modus vivendi for dealing with people who don't know that I'm an ENTJ or who have bad experiences with ENTJ, to just try to build consensus around ideas I have. So I'll try to present this and say, hey guys, I have this idea, what do you think? As opposed to, this is what I'm going to do and this is what's up. And so let's say an unenlightened ENTJ or an ENTJ who hasn't taken the time to work on the rough edges of being a TJ, I think is not an awesome person to hang around. They'll get a lot of stuff done, but they may not be someone you want to hang out with and have a beer with.
Perhaps more too domineering, a little too assertive.
Right.
Yeah. So in many ways, you've taken or preserved a lot of the positive traits of an ENFP, and some of those that come to mind as you and if you haven't listened to the first part of the interview, you should. or watch, depending if you're on YouTube or the podcast here. But you challenge the norms, and that's not necessarily an ENTJ thing. They tend to make very good executives. They go with the systems, they pay their taxes on time. They're not necessarily deep philosophers questioning things. That's not to say they're not intelligent or they're not philosophical in ways, but they're not questioning. And you've really went against the grain in terms of how you question, but also ENTJs are usually very career driven. And you are, in a way, like you have a very successful business. Well, you have multiple successful businesses, but you put lifestyle and happiness first, which is not, I would guess if you had a chart of ENTJs and time they spend with their spouses versus or whatever, it might not always be.
Right.
So that's very,
You could say either FP has infiltrated or that it was always there in the background, and TJ just sort of cleared out some of the brush and helped build the lifestyle I had. But it was content with what it did. Like, oh, we cleared all these systems so that FP Stephen could come in and continue to do, because as you say, those TJ tendencies within me, we create systems, we like to run those systems. That's the priority. But yes, that's why I know I'm a retired ENFP, because those things are still manifesting themselves.
And it's important what you said about tendencies. And there's another way to describe it as Myers-Briggs is describing really your preferences of being, right? It's not necessarily a mold, like you have to be this way, you cannot change. It's the kind of behavior that I would say comes more naturally, which can, in this case, you've adjusted through learned behavior.
And I would say that that's key, because if you look at any of the personality, any of the 16 MBTI sets, that all of them will present you with good that you'll like read with joy and say, oh, look how cool I am, this positive trait. And then you'll read the negative trait and you're like, oh crap, that's me too. So if anything, it presents you with a map in pencil so that you can work on those tendencies and say, oh, okay, I tend to upset people, I need to build consensus. Well, you can then adjust the map because it's made in pencil, and you can erase this boundary, create a new way of working, create a new way of, and challenging yourself and say, well, I don't naturally do that. And really building yourself, building a better version of yourself, because you've been given this map, as you say, of tendencies of your current mode of life. And if your current mode of life is your best mode of life, awesome. But you're in this like 1% of 1%. Most of the rest of us, we see there's a wildfire going on over here, there's a dumpster fire over here, there's an earthquake happening, there's a hurricane coming in. So we have to build our shelters or, plant trees or whatever else we need to do to, and that probably, what's coming in is like SimCity and like Warcraft and like, my teenage years of world building. But that's a lot of fun because you get to do it for yourself and it has real consequences. Unlike SimCity, unlike Warcraft, which has no real consequences, building a better you not just affects you, but it affects everyone around you, and it affects them in ways that you don't even know. Sometimes people will tell me they saw this one Instagram photo and they said that was it. That was the day that I decided to do X. And I thought, that's awesome. I didn't know that was happening. I was taking this photo because I really like this photo and I wanted to share it with my friends and whoever else. But you never know the effect that your better life, your improved life will have on other people. Yeah. And that's what's really great about Myers-Briggs or any other, again, Dan and I are not paid by Myers-Briggs, but any
I'm pretty sure I owe them some money and some kind of
at some point.
In some way, I probably owe them money, but
whatever tools you use to learn about yourself more, the benefits can aggregate to the whole community.
Definitely, and that's a really good point. Is whether it is Myers-Briggs or something like StrengthsFinder or Colby, there's a lot of these different tests. Is using them as a reflection tool and as a change tool. So becoming aware of, let's say, one of your weaknesses and then either deciding to improve it or to build your life so you're not necessarily needing to improve it. So that could be, hiring someone to help complement your weakness or some other aspect. So I think we need to cut the chat here just on your schedule, I know. So this is something we'll probably continue another time, I'm sure. For those watching on YouTube, if you have any questions, comments, if you want to see more Stephen, know his home address, any of that stuff, just put it in the comment. I will share that. And yeah, again, just if you want to share where people can get more of you.
Sure. I'm at Stephen Heiner, StephenHeiner, on Instagram and on Twitter. And you can also find me on theamericaninparis.com. And where else? Writerly.eu, which is my business address.
So if you are in need of hiring an awesome writer, this is your guy.
We'll see if we're a good fit, but maybe we will be.
Yeah, he's one of those writers who's successful enough that he can tell you to piss off if it's not a good fit. They're annoying types, you know. You want the struggling writer who's desperate. He's too good. Awesome. Great talking to you.
Thanks for your time, Dan.
Yeah, ciao.